Hello everyone. In this episode, I'd like to show you how you can convert all the generation characters onto the Genesis 9 figure. So this is just the character shape, not the textures, and it will not require any external tools like R3DS Wrap, or even though they will yield a much better result, they're also costly, and I'm going to show you a way of how to do this directly in Daz Studio, so no additional tools are needed for that. This works with any characters going all the way back to the Genesis 1 generation, so we can use Genesis 1, 2 male and female, 3 male and female, 8 male and female, and 8.1 male and female going on to Genesis 9. Now, word of warning, this isn't a perfect way to do it, but you will get results equivalent to those that you get from the Riversoft character converters that basically utilize this mechanism that I'm going to show you here. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to use Genesis 9, export them out and turn them into a fit suit that Genesis 8 can then wear, distort, and then we can export Genesis 9 distorted version out and bring it back into the Genesis 9 base figure as a morph. This is something I've done yesterday. This is not actually Victoria 9. This is what we might call Gia 9. So this is Gia 8 used with this concept and then imported back into the Genesis 9 figure so that you can wear Victoria's material. So it's not perfect, but it's close enough. So you can see some of the eyes have distortions here, and it'll depend on how the geometry of your source figure looks and how much the projection can do. But you can see some of the chiseling coming out here on the arm. So this is definitely Gia's shape and also her head morph. So quite groovy. And for the fact that this is completely free and basically built into Daz Studio, I thought, it'd be too good not to have a look at it. This is thanks to a tip from Chris, who's explored this in a stream recently. I've turned that into a clip and we'll link it in the description. So here's what we do to get started. First of all, we're going to go and load the Genesis 9 base figure in. And we're not going to use the regular character here. There's a couple of versions in here. We're going to use the dev load character. And I'm going to do that because this character will contain the mouth bag and the eyes and the eyelashes, and this figure will not. So this is basically what we need. This is the figure without attachments, essentially. If we zoom in, we can totally see that. No eyes. Creepy. And we're also going to have to set this to base resolution. So with that character selected, on the parameters tab under general, there's mesh resolution, and if you switch that over from high resolution down to base resolution, then the character is going to become a little bit chunkier, but it's necessary so that we can import this back as an SD morph later. So this is our character, and we're going to go and leave them as is in place for now. Next, we're going to pick a character that we'd like to convert. So it could be anything of your choice. Make sure your Genesis 9 is unselected in the scene tab here. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll just pick the first one that I come across here, which is Crow 8.1. So I'm going to go and convert an 8.1 character, but it'll work, the same principle will work with 8 and 3 and 2 and 1. So rather than loading the Crow character here, I'm going to go and also load the dev load character of Genesis 8. And you'll see in a moment why that is. So I'm going to go and find my Genesis 8 starter essentials here. And for an 8.1 character, I'm going to go load the Genesis 8.1 female dev load as well. Takes a second. There we go. When we're done, we can see we have two figures kind of almost in the same place as one another. So the Genesis 9 figure is a little bit shorter than the 8 figure, and it would take us quite a bit of time to match those shapes up. But thankfully, Daz have given us what's known as auto-fit clones. If you select your Genesis 9 character again and head over to the parameters tab, then head over to this little hamburger icon here and select under preferences, show hidden properties. We need that because there's some morphs in there that are kind of hidden, and Daz Studio uses those under the hood. And in our case, we're going to use the auto-fit clones, and they are used so that auto-fit can properly infer the shape of a clothing item onto the new figure. So with those hidden properties enabled, we're going to go under hidden here and open that up, and then we can see a menu called clones here. And in clones, and it's a little bit difficult to see, but we do have dials that we can set for Genesis 2 female and male, 3 female and male, and we have 8 female and male. 8 and 8.1 have exactly the same shape, so in our case we can just use Genesis 8 female, dial that up and see what happens. My Genesis 9 figure is almost morphing exactly into the Genesis 8 shape, at least what the upper body is concerned. The feet are not moving, and that's just because the resting position of Genesis 9's feet is a little bit different, so we're going to go and tweak those. But yeah, with this slider now set to 100%, we have the upper body perfectly matched. So if you want to convert any other character generation, then obviously dial up your appropriate shape, but it has to be the base shape. So rather than loading your character in immediately, load in the base character of the source figure you want to convert and dial up this fit shape on Genesis 9. So now also on Genesis 9, we're going to have to go and match the legs, and those are here. Genesis 9 right thigh, let me go and select that. And then on the rotational parameters here, I'm going to go and move this by kind of roughly, this is a side-by-side option here, kind of roughly as accurate as you can be. Mine kind of snaps into place at minus 6.57. And we're going to do the same thing on the left thigh in the other direction. 6.57 there. As accurate as you can be. You're not going to get 100% accuracy, but it'll be good enough for what we're doing. So this is now essentially Genesis 9 in the same position and shape as Genesis 8. Now let me go and select Genesis 9 here, top figure, and we're going to export them out. Head over to File, Export, and I already have a folder on my desktop which I'm going to put all these things into. I might make a new folder so we don't get confused. I'm going to call that OBJs2. There we go. That's where all my exported files will go into. Select Wavefront OBJ at the bottom of the dialog and name it something that you can remember what it is. So in my case, it's going to be G9 base. That's the first part, and then be very descriptive just for your own sake. I'm going to call it G8 female fit, just so that I know what that is. And that's an OBJ. That'll be exported. Scale doesn't really matter. I'm going to go and leave it on Daz Studio scale. And the only adjustment I'm going to make here is under filter objects. I'm going to go tick that box and check selected routes here. And that means anything else that might be in my scene will not be exported as I do that. Hit accept. And that is that. And now you can go and technically delete Genesis 9 from our scene. I'm going to leave them there and just go and make them invisible with the control eyeball icon so that they're no longer interfering with the scene, so that we're just left with Genesis 8.1 female right now. So let me go and import my OBJ next. So File, Import, OBJs2, G9 base, G8 female fit, open, and that looks pretty much exactly the same. Two figures in pretty much the same spot. If we were to move one over, then we can see we still have two figures in here. You can also color them differently. It totally doesn't matter. And now we're going to go and create ourselves that fit suit I was talking about. This uses some magic called the transfer utility, and clothing creators use that to transfer Genesis rigging into the unrigged OBJ. And Daz Studio is extremely clever under the hood, and it implies weight maps and infers rigging and all that in the same spots as the Genesis figure has it. So right now we're going to use a very, very complicated jacket, so to say, and there's a couple of ways that you can get to this tool. I prefer to go there from the hamburger icon on the scene tab here. So if you're on the scene tab, click this thing, and then under assets you will find the transfer utility. It is also found in other places, but everyone has access to it, so that's quite nice. You do that, up comes a little dialog, and we're going to pretty much leave all these features in place aside from one under show options here. First we're going to go and check the source item, which is going to be Genesis 8.1, so that's our donor figure, and then on the target that's going to be our unrigged thing we just brought in, which is G9 base G8 female fit. So let's go and do that. And the only thing I'm going to change is that at the bottom here where it says parent to source figure, I don't really want to do that right now. Everything else can stay in place. Hit accept. It takes a moment, and now look at this in the scene tab here. We do have a rigged figure now. And the cool thing is this has been automatically fitted to Genesis 8. So when we go and click Genesis 8 now, and I can even make them invisible here, Genesis 8 invisible, you can go and you can see this is definitely our correct geometry because we don't have eyes. That's all good. So with my Genesis 8 figure, my invisible Genesis 8 figure selected, I can now go to my actor tab and then pick myself a body. So let me just go under people and pick somebody I'd like to dial in. So Corral, for example, and the whole geometry changes, and it does a very, very good job. I have to say, it does a really, really good job. It's very cool. So you can dial in any figure that you think you want to convert, like Edie. I think Chris was converting Edie there. And it is pretty much following everything that it should. So you may find that on the eyes, you may get some distortion. So it's not a perfect solution. In this case, it actually works pretty well. But this is one of those areas where you can have distortion. So if I go and reset this and maybe go and find something like toon generations or any kind of stylized character. Let's try the toon princess here just for argument's sake. Yeah, there we go. This is a great example. The shape itself is pretty much there. That is kind of what you want. But if you look closely at the eyes, you can, with large deformations, you get results like this, and that's unavoidable. And you can go into something like ZBrush or Blender and then smooth these things out if you wanted to. But other than that, we're pretty much there. So thankfully, I don't want to convert her. But if I did, then this is one of the issues that I might be having. Let's go to, which one did we say? Crow 8.1, dial her up, and that is my character. That is definitely Crow. Look at that face. So, okay, that is how you can do it. And just to prove a point, if you make Genesis 8 visible again, then you have these two figures in the same place again. And you'll see some artifacts here. That's just each shader kind of trying to propagate the same space in 3D. So that's all good. How are we doing on the eyes? Not so bad, not so bad. You can see some distortions here, but I can live with it. It's fine. Okay, now that we've done that, let's go and export our currently shaped G9 object out again so that we can import it back into the real Genesis 9 figure. So for that, select your new object. So in my case, it's the G9 base, G8 female fit, and go and export that, same as before. File export, and I'm going to call that Crow G9, just so that I know what that is. And here, once again, we just click the Daz Studio preset and be done with it. We don't have any attachments here, but, you know, just to be sure, just make a habit of always clicking this filter objects item, and then you don't have any issues with morphs in the future, should you do it from different figures. So in this case, I didn't need it. It's just habit that I click it. We can now delete this figure out again because we're not going to need it anymore. We have it saved out. And now we can bring back our invisible original Genesis 9 figure that still has that AutoFit clone dialed up. Let me go and dial that down now, just so that we don't forget. Under parameters, you can select currently used if you like, and then we'll see anything that's dialed up. And my Genesis 8 female is still dialed up, so Alt left click on that so that that goes back to 0. Everything else, leave that in place. That's all good. We can switch the resolution level back to high resolution. That is fine. And now we're going to go and import our morph. Check this out. We go into Edit Object. So that's with the Genesis 9 figure selected. Edit Object Morph Loader Pro up here. That's what we need to do. And that'll come up with a little context menu here in which we can now select the morph we want to import. So in my case, under here, choose morph files. That is in my OBJs2 folder, and that is Crow G9. Import that. Down here, this should all be set as a default. If you did make mistakes and you want to bring it back, under override existing, you can right click on this and then say deltas only, just in case you're bringing in the same morph again. If you wanted to, you know, if you've tried something else out, then that is something you can do. Reverse deformations is also something that we need, so switch that to yes. Those are the only things. So overwrite we don't need really, because we're not overwriting anything. Just in case you did do that, deltas only is what you need. And then under reverse deformation, set that to yes. It's a good habit to set it to yes even if you don't need it. 99% of the time you do need it. Hit accept, and it says, oh yeah, it says this. Created morph successfully. That's what we want to read. If we do see error messages, then there was a problem probably on export. You may not have had the correct subdivision resolution. It might not have been set to base, or you may have had other objects that you have exported when you did that. So this is what we want. Hit OK. And currently we don't see anything, and that's because we need to go and dial up our morph. So open up your Genesis 9 figure in the parameters tab under morphs. Down here we now have Crow G9, and when I go and left click and drag this up, we can see that my Genesis 9 figure now morphs magically into Crow. Is that exciting or what? And she doesn't have eyes, so I'm going to have to give her those. And I've actually just realized that I should have loaded the non-dev figure so that we can actually take care of the eyes. Okay, perfect. Good. Well done, Jay. Let's go and delete Genesis 9 out. Let's go and load Genesis 9 again. This time the real figure here with the eyes. Duh. Because the eyes need to be corrected as well while we're at it. Good proof of concept that. So, same thing again, and with the Genesis 9, the full Genesis 9 figure selected, edit object morph loader pro, and then we'll go and import our Crow morph here, so Crow G9, and then we'll head over and make sure we're going to make uniques fine. Reverse deformations we set to yes, we say accept, and we say boom, morph successfully created. Under parameters, here we go. Crow, and now we can see the eyes as well, which is really nice. Look how they actually go into the correct position. That's kind of what we want. I get into this habit on newly created sliders that I click this little gear icon here and switch it so that you can't turn the minimum to its default -100. So 0 to 100 is what I like to use. You can also change the path of where that slider is, so you could put it under people or whatever. So that's something you can do. I did actually make a mistake here, and now that I'm seeing that, I can show you why, but we'll bring this to an end and then I'll show you what I should have done differently. It's new to me as well, so one of those things. So currently, with the slider dialed up, we will see that some of the poses won't quite work properly. So if I go into my Genesis Starter Essential poses here, if I were to go and dial some up, then I can see that this stuff tends to happen to the hands and the arms, and that's really not it's not a good look for Crow, I gotta say. So Control Z, do that, get rid of that, and let's adjust the rigging to shape and do this ERC freeze move that we need to do. So select this joint editor tool at the top here. If you can't see that, it's also under Tools, Joint Editor, and you can see that the problem with the pose applying has happened because look, her feet aren't in the correct space, and if you look closely at the hands, the bones for the hands at this moment in time are not correct. And to alleviate that, we can, with this tool, adjust the rigging to shape. So by just right clicking on the figure, head under edit and say adjust rigging to shape. And when you do that, you can see all these bones popping into place. Good habit to also click here, adjust orientation. If you don't do that, then some of the bones do not match up with where the figure points. But with orientation, that's all good. So now my fingers are where they're supposed to be. These things, they're new in Genesis 9. I think they translate into sockets in game engines. So let's not worry about that. It's also easy then to attach other bits and pieces to it. So, but still watch what happens when we move the slider up and down. Our skeleton does not move with the slider. And so an extra step is required to make that slider automatically calculate the position of the skeleton as we blend this in or out. And this is important for all kinds of sliders that we create this way. For that, we need to put this into edit mode. So right click on this, edit mode, and then right click on the slider, scroll down to the bottom and select ERC freeze, and that comes up with another exciting dialog here that will now essentially tell us what this slider is dialing in, and we're going to make sure it is married up to the slider so this can be calculated on the fly. Just hit accept, And eventually that is, I think, that. So now when we go and left click and drag our slider, you can see that the skeleton now moves together with our morph. And as a result, we can go out of edit mode. As a result, we can now go and apply poses, and that should look less scary. Look at that. It actually looks perfect. Haha. Fantastic. Hoorah, she's jumping for joy. I like that. I like that. Good stuff. So have fun with that. Let me just rewind here for a second and show you what I shouldn't really have done, and I want you to get into the habit of that as well. When I dialed in on my original Genesis 8 figure that was wearing the skin suit, I was habitually going under actor and then people, and then I've dialed up my people morph here. But you'll see that this also changes the size of the character. Now, while the morph will be baked in like that, we can see the eyes are moving fine. When you start using the new proportional size sliders in Genesis 9, that can have issues. So a better idea is to not use the people slider and just dial that out and dial in the head and the body shape independently from one another, because that means the character will retain their size. So rather than Genesis 9 changing size, we want them to stay the exact base size, and that way all the proportional sliders are working. So let me just quickly show you what I should have really done there. So instead of people, what we would have done is go under full body and then dial in. So in our case, it was Crow. We just dial in her body. And so this shouldn't really happen. If you dial in a body, often what you find is that the size of the character will remain the same. So like if we just use Charlotte as an example, if you dial her in, then really only the body changes, but not her height changes. So height ideally would want to remain independently. And then you can do the same thing on the head people, in our case Crow. That only really changes the head shape for Crow, but not the body. So it works with some characters, it doesn't work with others. If you do have an option to retain the body height, then please do that with the independent morphs rather than dialing in the whole person morph, which will then often change the size. Just something I wanted to let you know. Just out of curiosity, let me try an expression. And the expression pack I know hasn't been released yet, but it will be with you soon. So I'm hoping that by the time you watch this video, I'm sure that it is in your hands already. So under expressions, what happens with bored? Yes, she's bored, definitely. That works well. Is she bereft? Definitely bereft. Maybe she's fearful. Maybe she's like, oh. Very cool. So that now means since all these expressions work on Genesis 9, this is dynamite stuff. And you can breathe new life into your old characters that weren't actually all that old to begin with. There we go. Incredulous, like duh. Also silly. Silly is one of my favorite ones. You will have access to these very, very soon. There we go. This is how you can convert so-called legacy characters to the new Genesis 9 figure without having to buy another product or without having to shill out for things like R3DS wrap. Now, there are some limitations on the eye areas here. I haven't experienced them here with this character. There she is, Crow, actually very cool. And if you do, then you know why. It's not a perfect solution, but it's certainly going to get you there in a hurry. I hope I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.